we talk about employee engagement, we felt like it was something that's very important right now, very top of mind in the HR space, and thought we would share our thoughts with you today. So the title of it's how to do employee engagement with your team today. And again, I'm Bryan Gorman. I spent probably my 21st year in HR. I spent a lot of time in the payroll HR space. Just recently went over to CAROO, where they specialize in employee engagement solutions, and we'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to my term. But super excited about doing this with Britni, and I'll go ahead and let her kick it off and introduce herself as well.
Hi, my name is Britni Eisenmann. I am lucky enough to know a few of you on the call. Thanks for being here. My organization is GenElevate, where we just focus on employee engagement and drill down to removing barriers, which is an important topic that we'll be hitting today as well. Okay, so before we get too much into the nitty gritty, I want to talk about the ROI of having really truly engaged employees. Hiring and retention experts have been warning us this quarter that there's this glut of employees who are looking and poised to leap from our companies to new positions and in new companies. And some of this might be alarmism, but it's worth it if we take the time to look at what is in our control that we can affect the top performers in our organization sticking with us. We know that engaged employees are less likely to even think about leaving. And those are the employees who are willingly pulling their teams every day toward victory. In the last 5 years, Gallup research has shown us that companies who have highly engaged employees have about a 60% lower turnover. They have about 40% fewer callouts, and those organizations are 2 times as likely to hit their goals. And consistently, we see in research, and even you've probably seen in your own organization too, deeply engaged employees are more likely to drive down your healthcare costs as an organization because they are less likely to have episodes of chronic disease. So they're having fewer emergencies and have less need of ongoing intensive medical health care. Now, on the other side, actively disengaged employees are 12 times more likely to leave you for somebody else. If there was ever a year that had the right factors to drive disengagement, it was this last 12 months, maybe even to the day practically here in the US and in Indiana. And if there was ever a time where your marginally engaged or disengaged employees are going to think about taking back control by moving to another company, and that sounds like a good idea, it's going to happen in this next 6 months. Even if this is true of your employees, that doesn't mean you don't have the ability to sway their intentions with this. I'm going to deliver some good news here too. Unlike job satisfaction, employee engagement can't be bought with bonuses or with a raise. If you give your employee a bonus or a raise, that will not be reciprocated by meaningful engagement. And this is a good thing because so many of us, our companies are in the position right now where even when we know our employees deserve it and we want to give them that raise or that bonus, we just can't right now. So I say this to give you hope because there are so many other tools that you can use besides giving them the bonus or the raise that are every single time going to drive deeper engagement than that cash money. So I want to leave you with that hope right now that just because you can't give those bonuses or raises right now, that doesn't matter with employee engagement. It can't be bought with cash anyway. For the purpose of this hour, I want to have a shared definition of employee engagement. I know many of you probably have your own working definition, but for this hour, this is what employee engagement is: the willingness and the ability to contribute to your company's success. So we're going to define employee engagement as the willingness and the ability to contribute to your company's success. Now, for an employee to meaningfully engage with their work, with their co-workers, their team, and with your big, important mission, they need to have both of these factors. However, willingness is 100% your employee's responsibility and not yours. There's very little that we can do to sway the attitude of your employee and their decision to pull towards your big, important mission. Your time, money, and resources are much better spent on this other side, their ability to go ahead and contribute to your success in your big, important mission. We're going to use this framework for the rest of today. We're going to focus on the ability of the employee to engage on these three factors: accommodations, recognition and sweetening the pot, and barrier removal. Now, accommodations are often regulatory, sometimes there's legality issues. This is making sure that our neurodiverse, disabled, and other abled employees are able to fully contribute. We are not touching accommodations today. That is another topic for another hour sometime else. What we're going to drive down on today is this recognition and sweetening the pot and removing barriers so that your employee has the ability to contribute. And with that, I am going to hand things back over to Bryan, and he's going to talk about recognition and sweetening the pot for your employees.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brittany. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, and we were just saying before we got started, this is almost the 1 year anniversary of working from home this weekend or next week, when we all, most of us anyway, were sent home to work. And I think that, obviously when you see the slide, we live in a work from anywhere world, and that's certainly true. I know I've been home for a year. A lot of us have been home. Some of us are in a hybrid. Some companies are coming back. It's all just kind of a mixed bag right now. So I think that it's hard to do employee engagement. I think that I have one quote here that from an HR director we talked to yesterday. She said, honestly, the hardest thing right now is making sure our team feels connected. And is connected, because they just don't know they don't always talk to everybody. They don't always see everybody. Yes, we can do Zoom calls, but it's not the same. So, how do you keep employees engaged? And I know Brittany mentioned the monetary factors and all the other pieces and puzzles with that. But I think what's very unique to this presentation would be CAROO. And work culture is rapidly evolving, right? So before 2020, work from the office, the break room conversations, the interactions that we had in the office, hey, let's go grab lunch. Well, we can't always do that, these days. So now that's before 2020, and then you flash back a year ago. Yeah, again, the working from home, temporary solutions, just unclear where what was happening, and I guess employee perks and remote perks, just how do you do that, right? How do you make that happen? How do you execute? And I think a lot of companies just don't know how to do that right now. And then working from home, I think that's here to stay in a lot of ways. I know in this role, for me, for example, it's 100% remote. So a lot of companies are getting that way that they can trust their employees to work from home. They see that productivity is increased, and they agree that it's something they may do and probably will do in the future. There's some really cool stats here that I want to just briefly run through, just to kind of prove that employee care is more important, really, now than ever. 89% of workers at companies that support well-being initiatives are more likely to recommend their company as a great place to work as a measure of engagement. So, they feel supported, they feel like their initiatives are being heard, and they are going to be more engaged. 60% of people report that benefits and perks are a major factor in considering a job offer. I think that's huge, and it's a little different out there right now as far as companies and jobs and things going on. And then 96% of employees believe showing empathy is an important way to advance employee retention. Great stat there. And then highly engaged teams show 21% greater profitability within the organization. So it's just, again, to prove that employee care and employee engagement is vitally important to every organization out there right now. But again, like I mentioned earlier, how do you do that? How do you care for your team? We can maybe send a gift card, or we can, have a lunch, delivered to them, or things like that. But what does the execution look like? So that's what I want to talk about a little bit with CAROO. If we fast forward to, what's a perfect world look like? A thriving cloud culture where people feel connected and inspired. An easy way to manage and deliver on the execution of that program, and a personalized, delightful experience that is, both makes the employee feel valued, but doesn't, break the bank on the flip side of that, as well as to not, burden the employer. And I think with CAROO, you're going to find this in a very attractive, solution. It's really the world's first work from anywhere employee care platform for the flexible enterprise. So we can go, to small, medium-sized business, or to large organizations as well. And really, how does it work, and what is it? CAROO is basically pre-curated or customized boxes, really, of snacks, for example, and different swag items that can be sent directly to an employee's home. So we can ship 10 to 10,000 boxes, automatic address collection, doing the heavy lifting of that, simple order tracking, and then it can all be done through an email to an employee who says, you know what, I'm getting a care package. I just make sure my address is correct. And then we're engaging their team and delighting your team throughout the entire year. So that's how, in a nutshell, how the CAROO piece works. And the portal as well. All the employee has to do, and really from what we do, is work with HR teams to get the employee information. We get their addresses, we put the order in the system, and then we choose what box we want, and they're sent directly to their homes. So again, you can help your employee feel engaged by delivering something with a, personalized note, uh, items from your company, and being able to put that into a product that allows them to really, feel engaged and tied in with your organization. And we can get creative as we want to. We can take your stuff, because a lot of you probably already have, swag items and tumblers, things like that go into your creations. Now we can do the same thing. We can work with you to create just different one of a kind um, concierge boxes as well. And then also wanted to talk about some of the companies that we work with, Amazon, Nike, companies I'm sure that you've heard of, but that gives you an idea of some of the organizations that CAROO partners with. But I also wanted to talk about the partnership with Feeding America. And I think this is where the CAROO shines. So every time a box is sold at CAROO, we donate a meal to a family in need through our partnership with Feeding America. We also have what's called an Amplify creation, which allows, actually, with Black History Month in February, and then with Women's History Month here in March, and then Earth Day coming up in April. We have different boxes that are, for example, Black-owned brands have their snacks in there, or we have snacks from women-owned brands, for example, here in Women's History Month. But every box that we sell, a family in need is taken care of as well by a meal being donated to them. So also with the Equal Justice Initiative, 5% of the proceeds sold this month go directly back to that organization as well. So not only are we keeping employees engaged, but we're also, helping others as well along the way. So I'll turn it back over to Britni to talk about the ROI of a good question.
If you have a pencil and a piece of paper handy, you will need those in a few minutes. Or if you want to take notes on your computer, that's fine. But you're going to be creating something on your own, a tool I'm going to be giving you. To remove a barrier to an employee's ability to fully engage with the company's success requires that you first know where their barriers are. As a leader, your schedule naturally presents urgent and critical situations for you to solve each day. You're putting out fires before they take down your team. You're defending your team's boundaries and pouring into them and asking them to grow. But the nature of leadership means that it's less likely that you're going to know or even see your employees' personal barriers. So how do you, a leader with loud and critical puzzles to solve all day, ensure that you are seeing your employees' own barriers so that they are able to fully engage with your big and important mission? I'm proposing today that you do not need a complicated system to bring to light their barriers and to further deepen their understanding that you care about them and that you value them and that you're thankful that they're here giving their time to your team and to you willingly. Your employees are better able to enthusiastically engage with their work and their coworkers and your big important mission when they feel that you know their problems and that you care about them. They're able to problem solve more creatively, able to collaborate seamlessly when they feel safe and heard. This does not mean that you need to spend hours of your time devoting to getting to know each of your employees. I don't want you to run yourself ragged and thin getting there. I propose that a better tactic is getting good at really great questions. And just like I said, you don't need to spend hours getting to know your employees. I also don't want you to be thinking, as I say this, that you need to pour so many hours of getting sharp at the skill of good questions before you try this. You absolutely should work on how to ask great questions, but the tools I'm going to give you today, you can implement and start tomorrow, and they will still be effective. They will still drive meaningful and deep employee engagement with your team members. Here are the 5 areas that I want you to have a question ready in your back pocket for whenever it's needed for a team member of yours. The first one, job tasks. So the things that they're doing, the nitty and gritty of their job day in, day out. The second one, relationships with their peers, with their supervisors, with their direct reports. A question about discomfort or conflict situations. A question about expectations, their expectations of others or others' expectations of them, and input. The input that they have to offer, is that being received? And are they able to receive the input of others? I'm going to give you one example for each of these 5 areas. And that may be a great fit or not for you to use with your team members. But as I'm giving you those examples, I want you to picture in your mind one of your team members and thinking about crafting a set of 5 questions that would work with that team member, because that will be your assignment after we're done going through the 5 examples here. So here's an example for job tasks. Which part of your job takes up most of your time, and should it? A question for relationship. Who do you go to when you have questions about your work? A question about discomfort or conflict. Ask them, what was your last uncomfortable situation or conflict with a supervisor, coworker, or customer? And don't let them get away with saying there haven't been any, because they've been uncomfortable at some point at work in the past week or so. A question for expectations. Does your supervisor clearly explain what the organization expects of you? And a question for input. Can you give me an example of some type of change that you've recommended that's been implemented on your team? Here's some guidelines for you as you think through these questions and presenting them. These questions should not place blame or be looking to create a shame type microculture in this conversation. Your attitude and thought should be, there's an enemy out there and it's a barrier or a problem, and we can find it. So like that first question I gave, which part of your job takes up most of your time and should it? That should be given less, why are you spending so much time on this? And more, okay, if there is something out there that shouldn't be taking up so much time, that's the problem, not the employee. I want you to come up with one question for each of these 5 areas that you would realistically ask one of your team members at any given time. When you're done, I want you to put your favorite one in the chat so that we can all learn from your viewpoint and maybe get some more ideas for questions of our own. Oh, these are great. I love reading these. Okay, so Amy says, who is your sounding board when you get stuck on a problem? I like the framing of that, the sounding board phrase to use. Jeff says, do you believe you have been given the tools necessary to complete given job tasks? Okay, this definitely takes this away from like a blaming possibility even. It's like, hey, do you have what you need? Ben, relationship. What is an area you feel like you could use some coaching in? Ooh, I love that. Inviting them to ask for like a growth opportunity. And Matt says, do you have the tools needed to be successful? So kind of having them look at what's available to them and putting the responsibility on them to identify, what do I need to be successful? We can have these 5, questions in our back pocket, But then knowing how to use them or when to use them is a whole other skill set. So I'm going to briefly go over that. And then in the question and answer time, if you have more questions about it, we can go over it more. My strongest guidance on this would be, don't use any of these questions in a performance review meeting or environment. At the most base level, these questions help build trust between you and this individual employee, which is so key to them voluntarily later on letting you know where their barriers are, because you've already been asking, so they know that you're thinking about it. So that's my strongest guidance. Don't use this in a performance management setting, because to trust each other, we have to let down our own walls a little bit. And I don't care how huggy and hearts your organization is, if you're in a performance meeting, you both have some kind of barrier up. You just kind of need to get in there, identify what needs to be identified, and move on. So these are not for that. If you have one-on-one time with your employees, once a quarter, once a week, whatever it is, this is a great way to open up a meeting. Pick one of these questions and toss it at them. And maybe at your next one-on-one meeting, they'll be able to bring back something to move deeper or let you know that this barrier's been solved. It's not there anymore, which is a win you can then celebrate with them. But you also don't need to ask these in a structured environment. It doesn't have to be in a one-on-one meeting. It could be when you're passing them in the hall, or if you're remote, at the end of a team meeting, if it's just you two left, you can toss a question at them. It can be casual. It doesn't need to be formal. And as far as how, you don't have to do these verbally. So if a text or an email or, just leaving a voicemail or something like that is how this employee seems to communicate with you best, then go ahead and use that. You're not detracting from the effectiveness when they're not looking you in the eyes, because they're still going to receive that you cared enough to ask a question and you know enough to know there's stuff that you're not seeing. So you're going to be building trust no matter what route you go, as long as you're not pushing shame and blame, which we've already covered. Just because you are part of the detective team and you were part of this conversation discovering the barrier does not mean that you're equally responsible for the solution. So don't take on building toward a solution just because you were part of the discovery team. You're the detective, and that is your responsibility to help your employees identify their barriers, but it might not be your responsibility to build the solution. You need to figure out, can the employee do this on their own? Do you need to hook up some kind of collaboration to solve the solution? Or is it your responsibility to take ownership of this? But it's much more likely that your position is going to be supportive, or even just keeping accountability, asking about it in 2 months, than it is finding the solution. Especially when we deeply care about our employees, we can take on the responsibility of not just finding those barriers, but also solving them, because that's what a leader does, right? It takes it away. But you're empowering your employees so much more when you play an appropriate role. And often that is helping them get to the place where they can solve their own barrier. And then hopefully this will evolve to the point where they're coming to you with a barrier, and then they are able to make connections and collaborations with other people that can help them solve them on their own.
Perfect. Thanks, Brittany. Yeah, I think we should just open the floor, and any questions or concerns or input that you guys have, would love to hear any feedback, whether it's to Brittany about employee engagement, or myself about the CAROO, how that ties in with employee engagement as well. So
I would say one of the things that I think we've lacked in our company in recent months, going back to the last year beforehand, is the ability to, as managers, focus on managing the people rather than managing the work itself, which definitely declines the idea of employee engagement. So one of the things that we've actually put in all of the job descriptions for our managers and employers as finite deliverables is having periodic touch points with your staff within your department. And that's one-on-ones at whatever intervals you feel necessary, weekly, bi-weekly, once a month, whatever the case might be, but once a month being the longest between touch points, as well as making sure that you're having team meetings with your staff as well as wholes. So as we do reviews for our supervisors and our managers, Those are things that they will be reviewed on instead of just making sure the work gets done, and shifting more towards the idea of managing our people and letting the people do the work rather than managing the work itself.
I'm curious, was this in place before early last year? Has this been going on for a while, this having that in the job description?
That's fairly recent, within the last few months that we've put that in there. And it's coming from the idea that there's a bit of a lack of morale, or high morale at least, as a company in and of itself. Depending on who you talk to, some morale is going to be high, some is going to be low. But in general, I think we're on the lower end at this point. One of the things that we want to make sure that our managerial staff is focusing on is the morale of our people, and not just making sure the work is getting done. We want to make sure that the people who are doing the work feel good about it and have a connection to someone to be that sounding board, or to be, have the ear of one of the executive managers, or the second tier of managers that can influence decisions, and take complaints and concerns and feedback to the top, to let our top staff understand what's going on out there and keep a finger on that pulse.
Yeah, I would think that would be almost freeing for managers too. I mean, assuming they have the tools and kind of know how to at least start doing this.
Yep, and that's something that I've been working with everyone on, to make sure that understanding the types of conversations to have, like these weekly or whatever touch points, should not be a performance review every single time. Every now and then, yes, touch on performance, but largely let that staff member, let that employee do the talking, and ask very open-ended questions. How are you feeling today? How have you been feeling since we last chatted? What was the best part of the last couple of weeks? What low did you have the last couple of weeks? What can I do to be available to continue to help you in your role? Those sorts of questions. How's your work-life balance going? How is your workload when you are at work? How do you feel that workload is impacting your ability to do your job? Those types of questions. Not so much, let's talk about what you did right and wrong last week. There's a time for performance reviews, hopefully more so than once a year. But at the same point, we believe that having those types of open-ended questions about how the employee is doing just in general is going to go a long way to bringing us back to where we need to be.
I appreciate you sharing this story and your viewpoint. It sounds
You're
like
welcome.
you're on the right track. It can feel like moving an iceberg, to move
Yes.
from like a sluggish culture, especially when you're a leader and you feel it. It feels like heavier than everybody else feels it.
Right. No, I think we're moving into a better spot as we speak.
I think with us moving virtual, our culture has kind of been, yes, we have an overall corporate culture, but then each center kind of has its own flavor, right? This virtual move of work from home, because we're still working from home, has really given us the ability to integrate those centers in a way that's never been done. So finding out, of course, we have a bunch of software developers here, but finding out that some of those interests carry across different centers, and where it might just be 2 or 3 people that have an interest in that here in Indiana, there might be a whole Slack channel and virtual get together for whatever it is, whether it's, Dungeons and Dragons or Mario Kart or, whatever gaming they do, or trivia games that they do in another center. And we've really tried to open that up so that people are making connections, not just with their current center, but are able to make connections across the company. And that's one way that I've seen our people really feel more engaged, is not being kind of boxed into their own center.
That's a huge buffer against mental health impacts of the pandemic too. To do stuff like that is so brilliant, because I don't need to tell you guys what mental health looks like right now for employees, but yeah, that is such a good buffer for mental health challenges right now.